The Newshour Special Edition.
Welcome back. Well, Iran is seeing its most serious, widespread unrest in years, and the war of words with the United States is only intensifying. Protests have raged for about 2 weeks now in Iran. Initially, it was triggered by economic distress and a currency crisis. But many demonstrations have since turned openly anti-regime, with chants against the clerical leadership of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Dissent by women protesters has gone viral as they defy all restrictions of the Ayatollah regime. Rights groups and international reports say the crackdown is severe, with a rising death toll, thousands detained, communications restricted or cut. And now the United States president has also thrown his weight behind the protesters, saying US stands ready to help them. Trump has in fact also issued a direct warning to Iran's leadership, saying in effect, do not open fire on protesters or America will respond.
So Iran's in big trouble. It looks to me that the people are taking over certain cities that nobody thought were really possible just a few weeks ago. We're watching the situation very carefully. I've made the statement very strongly that if they start killing people like they have in the past, we will get involved. We'll be hitting them very hard where it hurts. And that doesn't mean boots on the ground, but it means hitting them very, very hard where it hurts. So they've done a bad job. They've treated their people very badly, and now they're being paid back. So let's see what happens. We're watching it. We're watching it very closely.
Now, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has said that Israel is closely monitoring the unfolding protest in Iran, noting that demonstrations for freedom have spread across the country. Netanyahu praising the immense bravery of Iranian citizens, saying the people of Israel and the world stand in awe of their courage. He said that Israel supports the Iranian people's struggle for freedom and strongly condemned what he called the mass killings of innocent civilians. Netanyahu added that he hopes the Persian nation will soon be freed from tyranny and said Israel and Iran could once again become the partners in building a future of peace and prosperity. And of course, Tehran has responded sharply to what the United States has said as well. And the leaders going on to say that they support these protests. Iran's parliament speaker has warned that if the U.S. attacks Iran, then Israel and U.S. bases and shipping hubs will be legitimate targets. Meanwhile, Beijing has said it stands firmly against external interference in Iran's internal affairs and expressed hope that Iran can maintain national stability in this regard. In fact, we've seen the Chinese media also taking a dig at Trump as well. Let's talk about what's happening in Iran, because there are multiple international reports and rights groups that say the death toll seems to be rising fast. Some numbers even pegged at 116. But while Iran's streets are engulfed in violence and arson, the exiled Crown Prince Reza Pahlavi has also spoken up. So what does it mean for the world about what's happening in Iran? And we'll talk about the India question as well. Joining us on the broadcast is Bazin Wagmer, Center of Iranian Studies, the University of London, and Pratikrit Pain, geopolitical analyst on the broadcast with us. Thank you so much for joining us, for breaking it down for us. But first, the question of the United States, Mr. Bazin Wagmer. How does the United States come in here? Because if the U.S. says that they are backing the protesters, and now in the latest, even Israel has come out to say that they are backing the protesters, how could this play out? Will this be seen as external pressure on the Iranians? Because this started off as legitimate protests within Iran against the regime.
And they still remain legitimate protests. It's just that President Trump has been gutsy enough to afford moral support and to show unarmed Iranians that as they go out and are being shot in cold blood, that the world hasn't forgotten them. And it was President Trump so far who has indulged in what you may call some saber rattling. But even the British Foreign Office and the Germans and the French have made a collective statement that we stand by legitimate protests and no violence to be visited upon unarmed Iranians, and that the government ought to stand by its own social contract, which quite frankly has broken down. And the country is on the precipice of what may be deemed now revolution. intelligence assessments and the rest are being updated, as you can tell, on a daily basis. All 31 provinces are being racked by instability, including the most poorest provinces in Western Iran, which hitherto we have not seen such violence in previous protests, harking back to July 1999, when the first university protests had broken up. The regime has some form and immense experience in brutally putting them down at every interval due to opposition exhaustion and the fact that they have the weapons and the money and the ability to do so and don't think twice of killing their own population in cold blood. But this time something does seem to be different. Now, you may ask me, what do I mean by different? Well, I'm a historian. I cannot prognosticate the future. But what I can tell is we are on the verge or the precipice, a cusp of something different. And why, very briefly? Because you have alienation across all strata of Iranian society, including those who were regime loyalists hitherto. That's to say, elite loyalists, but also the traditional classes and the patronage networks that supported the Shia clerical authorities, the Bazaris and the middle class and the low middle classes, the pious traditional sorts, not necessarily urban Gen Z sorts, but even they have come in because they've seen their earnings and practically vanish overnight. At the time of the revolution in 1979, $1 got you 70 riyals, 70. Today, $1 makes for 1.42 million riyals, a depreciation of 99+%. And that is pretty much sums up what the revolution has to show after 47 years.
Yes, and people have been unhappy with the economic crisis that Iran finds itself in. We have seen the kind of crackdown it has done on women as well, and we're seeing very, very powerful images. And many of these protests are even led by women who are defying the Ayatollah, which is a very, very powerful sign of things to come. But I also want to ask you, because when I asked the US question as well on what it would mean for Iran, because Iran has blamed foreign forces, is that just an excuse to have an even more brutal crackdown on the protesters? Because they've already said that the protesters will be classified as enemies of God, which means they can even get the death penalty.
Yes, this enemies of God and planting corruption on earth are stock Persian phrases which are trotted out in order to snuff out the population. They're past masters, that is, so it's nothing new. And the point is, nobody is aiding or abetting from externally, whether by funding or by weapons. These are individuals going out. For example, a 12-year-old girl was shot dead yesterday. It belies insults anyone's intelligence to tell me that she's an Israeli agent or an agent of the West as such. A 40-year-old mother with 3 children was shot dead, for example. Wounded who have been coming into Eastern Tehran's Al-Ghadar hospital. The emergency staff has privately mentioned to some outlets, which has percolated abroad, that the death toll is much higher than we've been told. And of course, the regime can clamp down on internet shutdowns, again, which is very good at, because of Chinese deep packet information technology, which it obtained way back in 2009 at the time of the Green Revolution. And not to mention the Russians and the Chinese who have aided and abetted this regime in order to clamp down its population, the intelligence services, and the Iranian deep state as such, the state within the state. That is to say, the IRGC and the Ministry of Internal Security, both who call the shots, with Khamenei as a titular head, of course, who is completely out of his depth now because he has nobody to turn to, and the regime is running out of not just steam, but also ideological coherence because there's nothing to show. And what makes it even more acute is that you have a self-styled Islamic regime here, which calls itself a society or a polity of God and ruled by divine authority. It claims to have moral capital, compared to, say, any other secular regime, be it in the Middle East, or, say, even the previous Pahlavi regime, which was a monarchical regime, a constitutional monarchy. But when you claim to be is a spiritually inclined and driven regime, yet the hypocrisy of the endemic corruption and venality of your followers and adherents, and those who've amassed, stashed away millions abroad, the IRGC and its members, many of whom are even abroad living and studying here, and whose female members themselves are unveiled on Western campuses and to be seen in Western cities, then you have nothing to show for yourself as you go about killing your own population.
And the anger is only spreading. It has now spread to about 100 cities. Iran has, of course, resorted to communication being cut off, internet shutdowns as well. But, Mr. Patikrit, I want to ask you on the India question. Why is the Iran protest a worry for India?
No, I think India has a wait-and-watch policy right now. India will not go ahead and suddenly comment because our foreign policy remains very clear on one thing. Number one, we believe that every country has a right to decide on its own what is good for them. So I don't think India will take a stand against the protesters. But I think India also has a stated principle that it is against any kind of external intervention or any kind of an external interference into the internal affairs of another country. So I'll tell you what, what is happening in Iran. It's not black and white. The reason is this: every citizens of Iran can decide what is good for them. And it shows that the moment you use excessive force to, strike down any kind of protest by turning them as agents of a foreign country, it doesn't help at all. And unless you accommodate them, unless you understand where the problems are, the situation is such that it might face even a worse situation than the regime in Iran. But the problem starts somewhere else. The problem is the moment the Americans think that they can bomb a place and suddenly things will be better, or they just step in and things will be better. Well, there are examples of Iraq, Afghanistan, Vietnam, Libya, Syria. The list is endless. And what kind of situation is there right now? It's for everyone to see. So the biggest problem right now is this: there is no doubt a huge, overwhelming proportion of Iranians who are fed up with the regime, which has overstretched itself into investing in Hamas, Houthis, and the Hezbollah. Its relationship is not only bad with the Israelis and the Americans, it doesn't have a good relation with the Sunni Arab bloc either. The problem is this: at the same time, there are a lot of people within Iran who are extremely pro-regime. Now, what happens is that, look at what happened in Iraq when the Americans stepped in and thrown out Saddam Hussein. It led to a civil war kind of a situation. Sectarian violence went up, and out of that chaos, ISIS was born. And that ISIS completely wreaked havoc across Middle East and North Africa. So what I think is that if there is too much of an external intervention, and if people think that taking away the regime, which is okay if the people of Iran do it organically, it's fine. But if you try to push it, then it will create a void out of which another, maybe a Shiite version of an ISIS will come out. And it will create another wave of terrorism in Middle East, which is not going to be good. But yes, the military industrial complex will not mind it because it means more war and more selling of weapon systems. So the issue is this: people of Iran can decide, and I think India will have no problem with that. External intervention examples, whether from Venezuela to elsewhere, situation after that has never been good. There is not any single example where the Americans intervened and the country became very liberal, very democratic, very pro-reform. It's not so. It isn't so. So that's the reason I think India has a cautious approach that people of Iran have absolute right to decide what kind of government they want. But if it is so that there are external elements who want to step in, force something, well, that is not going to create, as it is, there are problems. And I'll tell you what's the problem for India. The problem is the next step that what the Iranians will take is to block the Strait of Hormuz. Blocking the Strait of Hormuz would mean that there will be a major problem with the supply lines of the crude oil. That has a cataclysmic effect on the prices of energy because of instability, where you already have challenges because of the Russia challenge and the Venezuela issue. So the problem gets compounded. It doesn't end here. Remember, the Iranian army and the Iranian regime is not going to go down without a fight. And the world,
and
which is already fed up.
The question of Venezuela, when it comes in, the situation in Iran could be completely different. Of course, even for Venezuela, it was not something that the world really expected, that it all was done within 4 hours and the world could do nothing but watch. But it could be completely different, much more challenging in Iran. But there have been protests. We don't know what will happen next. The next few days are going to be very crucial because these protests have continued for 2 weeks now. And this is after mounting anger that we've seen in Iran. A lot more to talk about, of course, on the trade, connectivity, energy, security for India as well. But unfortunately, we've run out of time. Thanking our guests for joining us this evening.